Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining this event, Generation Equality, Accountability for Adolescent Girls. My name is Chelsea and I am a young leader from Kisumu Feminist Society. I am one of the co-facilitators of this major event. We are gathered here today to have an intergenerational dialogue with the Generation Equality Leadership to discuss the inclusion of adolescent girls at the process as the process moves forward. The idea of this dialogue during 24 hours round the clock for generation equality at CSW66 has emerged from the previous discussions with adolescent leaders. I am happy to share that this event is co-designed by a group of girl and youth leaders from various backgrounds, including myself, with the support of our co-hosts, the Irish government, the Adolescent Girls Investment Plan, and Purposeful. I would now like to hand over to my fellow young leader. Karen, take the event forward.
I think there is a technical glitch and Karen may not have been able to join us, so I will quickly cover that part. Thank you everyone for joining and thank you Chelsea for starting this space. Before we immerse ourselves in this space, just sharing some quick tech aspects to support your participation on this platform. You can click on the chat tab on the bottom horizontal bar to open or close the chat window. Please note that this event is being recorded and will be uploaded later on the websites of the co-hosts for viewing. Please also note that there is live interpretation available in English, Spanish, French, and Arabic. So please click on the globe icon to choose the language of your choice. Can we have the next slide, please? Please note that in all of the spaces that we create for anyone, we try to ensure that it's a safe and enabling space for everyone. Therefore, we request everyone to practice mindfulness, respect, authenticity, empathy, and care in this space so that we are creating a safe and enabling environment for everyone. For safeguarding, please note that safety and well-being is at the heart of everything that we try to do. We have two safeguarding focal points here today. One is myself. I am Pooja, and I work with Adolescent Girls Investment Plan, and we have Aminata from Purposeful, and we are your first level focal points in terms of safeguarding should you need that kind of support. Please feel free to reach out to us via chat or via email ID, which we will just post in the chat right now. And now, for us to be taken forward in the event, I will hand over to one of our very brilliant co-facilitators for the day, Gulmina. Over to you, Gulmina.
Thank you, Pooja, for telling us how we can collectively do to create a safe space for this event. So hello everyone, I'm Gulmina. I'm a Women Deliver Young leader from Pakistan, and I have also been engaging with AGIP in the past year for various girl-centric dialogues. I had the opportunity to speak as a panelist in the Economic Justice and Rights Forum in Generation Equality Paris. So I'm looking forward to the outcomes of this webinar and to the progress of the implementation, the recommendations that were made. So before we get into all the exciting stuff, I would like for us all to do something quick and fun to understand who is all joining us today. So you will now see a Mentimeter link and an access code in the chat as well. So please click on the link and we're excited to know all of your responses to three simple questions. The first question is, how do you know about generation equality? So please, as I see, the link has been shared in the chat. So please click on the link and answer the questions.
Thank you, Gumina. I am delighted to have this opportunity to share my experience and that of my fellow adolescent girl leaders who have been striving to make our voices heard and our leadership acknowledged in the spaces that are deciding our present and future. It is true, and we are grateful that many leaders from across the world are joining forces to challenge unequal power relations when it comes to decision making and strive to transform our collective understanding and practices on what shared intergenerational and intersectional feminist leadership truly means. It has been empowering to see how young leaders and other allies of girl and young feminists have acted to open the decision-making process and enable the girl leaders from across the globe to have their say in the generation. We are particularly inspired by the demands and recommendations in the Young Feminist Manifesto and demand and thank all the efforts of various generation equality stakeholders like UN Women Coalition leaders, national government, CSO funders, youth leaders, and more who have made commitments to accelerate progress and for adolescent girls. And this is only the beginning. Now that girl and youth specific commitments have been made in generation equality, I and my fellow adolescent girl leaders are curious to know what next. We are curious to know how adolescent leaders will be involved in the next 5 years in the implementation, accountability, and resourcing of girl-centric commitments. At present, we are facing many barriers in being able to join forces in the official generation equality process, and many of this is related to access to accurate information. We need clarity on how girls will be involved. We need clarity on how girls will be involved in the official GE process from here on. Clarity on who is mandated to implement the girl-centric commitments and at which levels. Financial accountability on the funding committed to girls and young feminists. Where do we access more information on this, including how to access the funding? In various spaces where the girl leaders have come together and discussed their ideas, these are some of the key emerging recommendations on the girls' inclusion. First, clear and proactive connection between commitment maker and girl leaders to enable two-way exchange of information on updates, progress, feedback, suggestion, and concerns.
Thank you so much, Chelsea, for your words. Completely agree. I think we're now going to move on to discuss the agenda for today. So today we will have spoken word poetry, panel discussion, question and answers with the audience, a panel closure, and the campaign presentation. So we have a lot of fun things lined up today, and what better way to create space for another adolescent girl, such as myself and Chelsea, than to share the space with Milagros. So I'm delighted to invite Milagros to now take the space. Milagros, over to you.
Ya sigo. Ok. Buenos días. ¿Se me escucha bien? Ok, ¿se me escucha bien?
Milagros, sí.
Ok, gracias. Bueno, mi nombre es Milagros y voy a recitarles un poco. Kuyaykichik, Jalaykichik, Jainats, América Latina, Nidhan Sotimtim. Para mí es un honor estar aquí presente en representación de mis compañeros y compañeras. Soy Milagros, la delegada latinoamericana del Movimiento Latinoamericano y del Caribe de Niños, Niñas y Adolescentes Trabajadores, MOLACNATS. Tengo 17 años y soy protagonista desde los 14 años. En esta ocasión voy a recitarles un poema titulado La lucha de una gigante, de autoría propia, que tiene como temática el liderazgo de las niñas. Tenía 8 años, cuando por pequeña no me dejaron hablar. Luego, teniendo 14, seguía sin poder opinar. Mi corazón se agitaba, como las banderas que exigen libertad. No lo puedo evitar, necesito opinar. Necesito defender eso que los adultos llaman derechos, pero no me los dan. Mis compañeras ahora son maltratadas, asesinadas, explotadas. Dentro de mí se encendió una llama que dio inicio a la lucha de una pequeña semilla que ahora es una rosa. Tu lucha, mi lucha, nuestra lucha, que hasta ahora era invisible, toma forma en estos tiempos. Porque las niñas del campo y la ciudad necesitan tu voz. La sala de los parlamentos, donde se habla de nuestro cuerpo, que sean nuestras por derecho, porque nada sobre nosotras sin nosotras. Por eso que vivan las niñas del campo y la ciudad. Ahora somos muchas y vendrán muchas más. Este es nuestro momento, estamos organizadas, estamos en movimiento. Niña y adolescente que me escuchas, fortalece tu valentía, que juntas nos encontraremos luchando, conspirando, con garra, ternura y sororidad, por la defensa de nuestro futuro y presente. Alcemos nuestras voces para la construcción y escribamos un nuevo contrato social que guíe a nuestras compañeras en la búsqueda de una sociedad con igualdad. Paririsum ñaupajma. Gracias.
Thank you so much, Milagros. Thank you so much. That was like really, really powerful. And you can see the reactions in the chat. We absolutely loved what you said. I also want to just quickly acknowledge that we do have some technical glitches. We are experiencing some lags. We are experiencing some drop-offs and quite a lot of background noise. So just thank you everyone for being patient. Thank you everyone for still being there with us. And to take us forward, next, I would like to hand over to Kulmina. Kulmina, please take the stage.
Thank you so much, Pooja. And yes, Milagros, that was a very touching poem. Thank you for sharing that with us. So now I think it's time for our panel discussion. Today we have brilliant leaders joining us today as panelists, representing the diverse leadership that is driving the generation equality process forward. So we are delighted to have here with us today, first of all, Ishanvi, a young leader from the Adolescent Girls Steering Committee, Lopa Banerjee, Executive Coordinator, Generation Equality and Director, Civil Society Division at UN Women, Ambassador Brian Flynn, Deputy Permanent Representative from the Permanent Mission of Ireland to the UN, Lakshmi from Access Planet Nepal, joining us as a Girls Front Guarantee, and Subha, Manager of Program and Innovation at CREA, representing the Action Coalition on Feminist Movements and Leaderships. Before we begin, I'd like to let the audience know that the question and answer section is right after this section. So if you have any questions, please feel free to list your questions in the chat box so that we may read them after the section ends. Thank you so much. So I would now like to mention that I'm delighted to have the representation from the generation equality stakeholders in the audience. If you are someone who has made recommendations, then please feel free to add share your progress updates and action plans on the link provided in the chat box so that we all may know of what efforts you're making to implement your recommendations and your commitments. Thank you. So Ishanvi, my first question is for you from the Adolescent Steering Committee. As a fellow adolescent girl leader and having been proactive in the generation equality process so far, what are your recommendations for generation equality leadership on meaningful inclusion of adolescent girls in the implementation of girl-centric events? Moreover, what are your suggestions for adolescent girls on what they can do to join the implementation process?
Thank you so much, Kulmina. And thank you for everyone for having me here today. I'm really excited to be here. Firstly, I'd like to preface by noting that this issue is ultimately a stakeholder issue. The burden is on the stakeholders to include adolescent girls in decision-making processes, not the other way around. Adolescent girls should not have to seek opportunities that should be made readily available for them. Given that we are 25% of the world population and adolescents as a whole control $143 billion in spending power, we must ensure that girls are given meaningful space and decision-making in all accountability framework development discussions, whether that's within the action coalitions covering anything from gender-based violence to technology and innovation for gender equality. Adolescent girls need to be highlighted in every single discussion, taking at least 33% of that decision-making process, because we need to hold a considerable amount of that group in order to ensure that our voices are being effectively heard. I think our second main priority is intersectionality. We need to one, ensure that girl leadership is devoid of any kinds of tokenism, that we are not being used solely for the fact that we come from some sort of demographic, but that does not mean we do not include girls from certain demographics. It is absolutely necessary that any adolescent girls that are being included in these discussions holistically represent the entire adolescent girl demographic, whether that means like trans adolescent girls or migrant adolescent girls or refugee adolescent girls. We need girls that come from as many backgrounds as possible to source the most holistic understanding of what our needs are and how to best address them. What we also need is the implementation of an actual body, a formal body that includes adolescent girl voices. We need our voices to be effectively heard and determined in an official body that supports us both financially and administratively. We need to, one, have this body address capacity building for girls, strengthening the capacity of girls so they can engage effectively and meaningfully, and also ensure that the structure is not only responsive, but also transparent and accountable with official stakeholders. We need to ensure that there is important communication that is being effectively streamlined between adolescent girls and stakeholders, so we are consistently in the know of what's going on and how our representation is being included. We also need to ensure that there are transformational development and leadership opportunities for adolescent girls. Not every girl who will be a part of these processes will have experience, but that does not mean that their voices cannot be heard. We need to ensure that we are employing the appropriate amount of opportunities for them to develop their leadership skills and then also be able to broadcast their voices on a global scale. We need to ensure that our communication is intact, our comprehension is intact, and most importantly, our transparency between adolescent girls and stakeholders. Thank you.
So thank you so much for sharing that, Ashanga. I completely agree. There needs to be a shift in more adolescent girls in decision-making spaces, and they also need to be intersectional and make sure they're not just there for tokenism. I completely agree with what you shared. I would now like to ask a question from Lopa Banerjee from the UN Women. How are adolescent girls being involved in the official implementation and accountability processes in generation equality? And to what extent will these recommendations by the girls impact the overall decision-making process? Please share your thoughts.
Thank you very, very much, Gulmina, and thank you very much. It's a great privilege for me to be on this in this discussion. Thank you very much. I want to start by acknowledging the tremendous leadership, resilience, and courage of all the adolescent girls currently enduring war and invasion in Ukraine. And not just that, but adolescent girls who have been leaders and who have shown amazing courage in conflict situations all over the world. Ukraine is neither the first, unfortunately, nor the last of conflicts. And we stand in solidarity, and our respect is paramount for their resilience. And we ask for an end to the war and for peace to prevail. With that, let me start by saying that the leadership, contribution, and participation of adolescent girls in generation equality has been incredible. It has been a humbling and learning process for us at UN Women, and indeed for all of the stakeholders who have been engaged in generation equality, to understand how to work with adolescent girls, centering their leadership at the core. There is much more that we need to do. And this is very, very clear. Going forward, we are currently in the process of developing the implementation plan for generation equality for the next 5 years. So going forward, very clearly, adolescent girls have to be at the center of the movement sustainability and commitment, accountability, and implementation process. What does that mean? That means clearly that as we set up the multi-stakeholder partnership model for generation equality that is going to steer this going forward, adolescent girls need to be part of that. We are launching the commitments dashboard later today, and you will also hear about the accountability framework and where we are with that. And going forward, you would be able, adolescent girls are going to be able to look at the commitments on the dashboard, to connect with different leaders on the commitments, and we are going to be working with you and with other stakeholders to create the spaces for girls to be involved in the decision-making process of generation equality going forward into the next 5 years. We are still not where we need to be. And I want to state that frankly and humbly. We have learned enormously from you, and you are continuously holding us to account. And I want to thank you for that. What needs to be put into place now as we go forward are the spaces that will allow for better information sharing, that will allow for much greater accessibility, much deeper inclusion, most importantly, safe spaces, a safeguarding policy that allows us to engage with you in a central manner. And this will also be done with other UN agencies that are both Action Coalition leaders, but also that are working on the adolescent agenda. So we are going to develop an implementation strategy going forward together with you and other stakeholders that looks at a clear timeline of good practice sharing, learning, and setting in place the modalities that have to be in place to ensure a systematic, sustained, and safe leadership of the adolescent girls in this agenda going forward. I want to end by saying that unless we are able to successfully center the leadership of adolescent girls for generation equality will not achieve its goals. You are the present and the future of gender equality. You're 25% of the world today. Without your leadership and your contribution, generation equality will remain incomplete.
Thank you so much, Lupa, for sharing that. I completely agree with your last statement, actually all of your statements. But yes, I completely agree. And I think we all feel solidarity with Ukraine, the adolescent girls who are just like us, and they're going through so much right now. And we're all standing in solidarity with them. I would now like to address my question to Brian Flynn from the Ireland government. What is it that makes Girls Fund such an innovative and inclusive project for adolescent girls? And secondly, how will the government of Ireland continue to champion girls' inclusion in generation equality processes and to accelerate your generation equality commitments? Please share your input, Brian. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Galmina, and I'm delighted to be here and participating in this event with all the other speakers. And it's really particularly good and important that we have an opportunity here this morning to hear directly from girls and how we can be made more accountable for all the promises and commitments we make. Are we living up to them? Are we delivering? And I'm happy as well to be the first male voice this morning, because I think it's so important that we recognize that the issues we're talking about are the responsibility of men as well. We all have to be champions, defenders, and advocates for girls' rights. And that's something that's really important. I think the real value for me today really is to hear from others, but I also just say a few words from our own perspective. But I do just want to acknowledge the really powerful remarks we heard already. I think Chelsea spoke really on some important issues about access to information, clarity about what's happening, accountability about processes, and I think some really important points there. I think, as was said in the chat, I think Miller Gross, that really powerful poem, which was a call out for voices to be heard and for equality, and really want to appreciate that. Agree with a lot of what Ish Anfi said as well. It's so important that inclusion and inclusivity happens, that it isn't something people have to look for, to ask for. It should be part of the way we work. And of course, that needs to be in a meaningful way, not in a tokenistic way. And just on Lopa, who's a good friend and is doing fantastic work, just fully to agree with the comments you made on our concern about the situation facing women and girls in Ukraine at the moment. And unfortunately, it's not the only example of conflict, but it's one very much on our minds at the moment. In Ireland, we've seen, we've had real examples in recent years, in recent decades, about how younger generations, and in particular women and girls, can drive change and progress in a society. We had some powerful social movements that were the engine behind some of the advances we've made, whether that's in terms of marriage equality or sexual and reproductive health and rights. It's often been young people and certainly women leading the charge in these areas. And it's helped Ireland become a more equal society. And really what's behind it, when we look back on 10, 20, 30 years of change in Ireland, it's about equality, but what drives it is a greater willingness to be tolerant of others, tolerant of difference, and thinking, as our former president, Mary Robinson, always put it, to put yourself in the shoes of the other, to think of how it is for the other, and to have that as a factor in your thinking. We're also seeing this youth leadership on a global level. If you look, for example, at climate change, a lot of that has been driven by young people, including here in New York. People might remember the summit we had in 2019, I think, which was so driven by young people, and we were involved at that time in the youth element of that important summit. So for us, when it comes to the Generation Equality Forum, a lot of our focus has been on how to highlight the importance of young people's participation and when it comes to empowering gender equality. And this is part of our overall foreign policy aims and our international development policy as well. We've particularly focused on education. We see education as key, and we launched the Drive for Five initiative a couple of years ago, which was a global call to action on ensuring education for adolescent girls and quality education. We know that without this, we won't be able to find solutions to global problems. Gender equality is a catalyst for progress in many areas, including climate change, but it's also symptomatic of problems. We know that in countries where there is more gender inequality, where there are greater levels of gender-based violence, these are all indicators of wider insecurity and instability in a country. So we need to be ready to empower and include girl leaders in a meaningful way in all their diversity and have them at the center of initiatives. And that's something we're very focused on and will be. We're delighted to partner with Purposeful and Plan International to support the Girls Fund. And we will hear today more about that. This will strengthen girl and young feminist-led movements to really drive progress in gender equality. We've committed $750,000 to the fund over the next 5 years. And as part of a broader funding commitment of at least $50 million to feminist and women's rights organizations. So, this is partly when people ask, what can you do as a member state? What can Ireland do? It's about providing funding, of course, but it's also about targeting funding in the right areas and being an advocate for supporting girls and young women in their ability to be activists at a local and global level. So look, I've gone on long enough now. As I said, it's really, for me here today, I really want to hear more from all of you. Happy to listen and take what we hear back to our colleagues in Dublin and here in our mission in New York, so that we can try and further develop the ways in which we can support women and girls in any way possible. So thank you again.
Thank you so much, Brian, for your words. It's very heartening to see that progress is being made on the generation equality processes. And you're right, gender equality is something that we're all struggling with, and it can only be overcome if we all collectively work together, male, female, everyone works together. My next question is for Lakshmi from the Girls Front Guarantee. We are discussing the Girls Front and how that has made moving resources to adolescent girls more possible. So we would now like to hear from someone who had access to that fund, such as Lakshmi. So Lakshmi, we would love to hear from you on your experience of engaging with the Girls Fund, its support on your groundwork, and some recommendations and considerations you might have for other generation equality leaders who also committed to funding girls and other young leaders in their processes. So please share your experiences and any advice you may have, Lakshmi.
Thank you for this opportunity. I quickly would like to start my presentation that we from Access Planet received the Girls Fund actually in last September in 2021, and the major purpose of our grant was on movement building for girls and young women with disabilities. That's what we work for. So this access to this funding has been crucial for us, as there are very few opportunities for the organizations like us led by girls and young women with disabilities. And because other organizations support only the experience like group who have technical skills in writing the good proposals and all. So regarding what was the impact, right? So Access to Girls Fund has significantly supported our work on the ground. So we conducted series of activities in far western province of Nepal, where we conducted 2 days training of trainers to young women human rights defenders with disabilities on literacy, legal literacy and leadership. So they also conducted leadership training to other girls in the community and raised the issues to the local government in the grassroots. So this fund has been significantly supported in empowerment of girls and young women with disabilities and bringing the issues of girls and young women with disabilities in the decision making. I would like to go over to the recommendation that we are very excited that the Generation Equality has made commitment that to spend lots of resources to girls. So we would like to recommend, please clarify how we can access those funding for the empowerment of other girls and young women. I also have recommendation that there should be clarity in allocation, how much budget we want to allocate for the girls and how much budget for women. There should be clarity. Thirdly, I also would like to recommend that while providing empowerment opportunities and while examining the proposals for funding the organizations led by girls and young women like us, their examinations should be made according to the seriousness of the issue, not the technicality of the proposal. Otherwise, those who were historically left behind are always going to be left behind, and those who have access to those fundings always will have, they only will have access. So finally, when any announcement are to be made for the empowerment opportunities or any other opportunities, it should be made in all the formats, including text format, audio, video, picture, sign language, braille, so on and so forth, so that it will be accessible to all. So finally, I would like to conclude that change is possible, and it is possible in our generation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Lakshmi, for sharing that. And I completely agree. We need to have more transparency in the allocation of these funds that you were referring to. Completely agree. And so now I would like to move on to Subha, who is representing the feminist movements and leadership. And the commitment that they've made is number 4, which is currently being displayed on the slide, on providing capacity and resourcing support to adolescent girls. So Subha, we are curious to know more about the progress so far on your commitments centering girls and the next steps from your end to accelerate the implementation towards these commitments. Would love to hear more about this from you. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Subha. I work with CREA. CREA is a global feminist human rights organization led by feminists from the Global South. And it's my honor to speak today on behalf of the leaders of the Action Coalition on Feminist Movements and Leadership at this important event. In our AC, from the outset, we have been deeply committed to centrally integrating the concerns of girls and young feminists and their movements in our vision and in our blueprint. We have been lucky to have powerful representation from young feminists in our AC, but beyond this, we all share a vision and a belief that young feminist-led movements are essential to building a just, equitable feminist future where every person can exercise and enjoy their human rights. This is why 1 out of our 4 action areas in the blueprint focus specifically on the leadership and the movements of girls and young feminists in all their diversity. We want these leaders and their movements to have better, more flexible funding. We want safe civic space for their activism and for their participation in decision-making. We want to promote accountability towards all our responsibilities to girls and young feminists, like we're doing now. And we want everyone to invest in building critical feminist leadership in all young people. In our AC, all stakeholders have made significant gains in our commitments to girls and young feminists in the last year, but I have limited time, so I will just speak to a few. Canada has launched a year-long global campaign designed for embassies and missions abroad to open doors for young women advocates and leaders in all their diversity, such as those working on climate action, LGBTIQ rights, disability, peace building, indigenous rights, democracy, GBV, and more. Gucci, among many interventions focused on young people, is offering direct, core, flexible, multi-year funding to feminist organizations, groups, movements, and young activists, including for groups led by young feminists and for young feminists. OHCHR has been engaging with this issue in a number of ways, including trying to open space within the UN. This includes advancing the promotion, meaningful participation, and protection of young women and feminists and their movements in all spaces. The office has continued to advocate for this, in particular at the country level. The intersessional seminar on challenges and opportunities of young people in the field of human rights was convened by the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights at the request of the Human Rights Council last year. And this was another notable outcome and featured a range of perspectives from young women, including on SRHR and their challenges working with human rights mechanisms. Gender Links have been holding women's political participation academies with a focus on young aspiring candidates, as well as cross-generational dialogues between seasoned politicians and aspiring young women politicians. Women Enabled are an advisor to the Global Resilience Fund, which is a partnership between social justice funders committed to resourcing girls and young women's activism. We at CREA, as always, remain committed to championing young people and girls, especially as leaders in their communities. We have developed a primer for South Asian movements on challenging the criminalization of young people's sexuality as an outcome of long partnerships with several young feminist-led organizations across South Asia. We continue our community-based programs, which are especially designed for young feminists and girls. Most notably, this year, we implemented a workshop for young trainers who work with girls and young people in India on technology and digital space. Girls continue to be a primary constituent of several of our key programs, such as the It's My Body program and the Sports, Expression, Leadership, Freedom Academy, or the Self Academy, which are designed to build the capacity of girls and young people to take charge of their sexual and reproductive health, challenge gender norms, and claim their place as leaders. And this was just a snapshot. The next step for us, I think, is that we are keen to map every stakeholder's work in this area against the demands of young feminists and girls in diverse contexts, and really hold ourselves accountable to the question, are we truly responding to these demands? Are we hearing them? Are we actually designing programmatic and funding interventions which are really building on what girls and young feminists say they want and need? And of course, we want to remain in collaboration with young feminists and girls. We want to keep listening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Subha. It's really heartening to hear of all the progress that PIA is making in regards to more inclusion of adolescent girls in different decision-making processes. So I'd like to say thank you all once again for everyone for sharing your time and sharing your inputs. Your responses are very insightful and promising. As an adolescent girl myself, and on behalf of all of my fellow girl leaders, we are grateful and hopeful for your leadership on meaningful inclusion of adolescent girls in the generation equality processes as it progresses. I hope this dialogue has brought more clarity to all of us in ways through which the adolescent girls will continue to be included in the implementation, accountability, and resourcing of the girl-centering commitments. It surely did for me. I definitely feel more aware of everything that's going on around the world because it's really heartening, it's really insightful to learn so much about the progresses that are being made, such as like Korea and Ireland, everyone. It's really heartening. So I would now like to hand over to Chelsea, my fellow young leader, who will be moderating the open question and answer discussion next. And these questions have been asked by the audience to our respective panelists. Thank you.
Just a quick checking. Chelsea, are you there? Can you hear us? Okay. I think there is some technical issues, so I will take up the questions for now. And Chelsea, whenever you're able to log back in, if somebody could let her know in the chat, I could just jump in. So, all right, the very first question that we have from the audience is for both Ishanvi and Lakshmi. And the question is, how can we as older feminists be better allies to you in ensuring we don't close the doors for you the same way doors were closed for us when we were your age? Ishanvi, if you could respond first, and then we will take a few points from Lakshmi.
Thank you so much, Beryl, for this question. I think it's a really important discussion that needs to be had about how older feminist allies can be allies to adolescents. And I think the answer is primarily hinged in educating your community. So while us as adolescents right now, the biggest things that we need is emotional support, and as well as alongside like financial and other tangible resources, I think the largest stigma that prevents adolescent girls from speaking up and sharing our voices is the concern that we will not be heard appropriately because of the stigma that's present within our own like conservative communities. So as older feminist allies, doing the most you can to ensure that you are using your voices to promote the needs and awarenesses of adolescent girls within your own spaces, as well as supporting in any capacity, any initiatives that we do. This does not mean occluding the spaces that we have, because those spaces are necessary for us to broadcast our voices, but supporting them through reposting or other mechanisms which bring other adolescent girls on board. So I think it's essentially the most important to, one, educate your surrounding community on the needs and the necessities of adolescent girls, and two, to support us alongside us, and not to occlude the spaces that we do, the minimal spaces that we do take up. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ishanvi. Like, really brilliant points. Also curious to hear from you, Lakshmi, next.
Thank you for this question, and this is very, very important question that I strongly would like to make some points that the experienced or older feminists, they should include us together. Very simple example, right? When we represent in some like mainstream development process, make a rule in the organization that one person should be the experienced one and one from the younger generation, and having board or anything in the leadership position, decision making position, make sure that both the experienced one and the younger generations are included together in both in the like organization forum, and slowly and gradually it will lead up to the decision making in the government level. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lakshmi. And yes, that's very straightforward, and definitely we would want more organization, people and institutions to start really adopting that meaningfully. And I see that Chelsea is now back with us here on camera. So I would hand back over to you, Chelsea, if you could read the next question from the audience. Over to you. Sorry, Chelsea, we cannot hear you. Can you try speaking again?
Thank you so much, Pooja, for giving me this opportunity to speak. My next question is addressed to Ambassador Subha. How can adolescent girls continue to access the progress, updates, and opportunities that emerge as a result of the commitments made by SC6, especially the information capacity building and financial support and opportunities?
I'm sorry, was that question addressed to me? Okay.
Yes.
Sorry, Chelsea, could you just repeat the question? I didn't catch the second part of your question.
Okay, Ambassador Subha. My question is, how can adolescent girls continue to access the progress, updates, and opportunities that emerge as a result of the commitments made by SC6, especially in the information capacity building and financial support and opportunities?
Great, thanks, Chelsea. Just to be clear, I'm not an ambassador, thankfully. I'm a member of civil society, so I get to play the troublemaker role along with many of you for many of our ambassadors. So just to respond to your question, I think it's a really important question. I think, like one of your colleagues said before, the onus is really on us, is really on Action Coalition leaders to make sure that, whatever progress we're making is transparently communicated to all girl leaders and young feminist leaders who are a part of this process, but also to those who are not, right? And who may be outside the GEF kind of universe right now, but who are nonetheless doing very, very critical work. So it's really a process of ongoing transparency and accountability to our movements that we really have to take very seriously. In our AC, for example, we have had a process of continuously reporting out to other feminist organizations and other movement actors, just as simple as doing, a couple of webinars every 6 months to report on the conversations that we've been having, the progress that we've been making, and also to take, other movement actors' input, to take people's comments, questions, criticisms back to other AC leaders. So this type of, transparency and dialogue process helps us to do that, helps us to communicate on one hand, communicate what we have been doing, but also on the other hand, to take your questions and inputs and then make the changes as they are relevant to our blueprint and things like that. So I would encourage all other action coalition leads to, take that responsibility of transparency very seriously. And to make sure that, whenever we are communicating out about a funding opportunity, for example, that we make an explicit, reminder to ourselves that we are including girl-led and young people-led organizations in those communication efforts. And to, keep them always as part of the ecosystem to whom we are reporting, and to whom we should remain accountable. Thanks for your question, Chelsea.
Thank you so much, Subha, for your response. The third question will be addressed to Lupa. And it is relating directly to the generation equality commitments and how will financial commitments be tracked and disaggregated, so we know that funding is going directly to girl groups.
Thank you so much for that question, Chelsea. And let me start by first thanking you, Subha. Thank you for being the troublemakers that you and other civil society action coalition leaders are. Without the good trouble that you make, there would be no change, no transformation. So thank you for being good troublemakers. And may I ask all of you to continue to be that. To the question, as I mentioned earlier, we're really excited about the launch of the commitments dashboard later this afternoon. So when you go into the commitments dashboard, you will be actually able to track every single commitment. You will be able to click on it and you will be able to see who has committed what, whether it is money, whether it is policy commitment, whether it is any other kind of, whether it is an advocacy commitment, you will be able to go in and track and see exactly who has committed what, including financial commitments. So that is as far as the tracker is concerned at this point in time. However, the tracker is still a static piece right now because it shows you who has made what commitment, but it is not showing you what is the progress on that commitment. So between now and the UN General Assembly later this year, what we are going to do is actually to put in place a tool, a survey tool that will then track what the progress is against each of these commitments. And the idea is that we should be able to launch around the UN General Assembly later this year, an update, a first year, because it would be the first 1 year since the forum. And so we would be able to launch an update on what has been the progress. So you would be able to track that and critically see that, so that where we see gaps, that can then be addressed. And this is why it's absolutely central that in the implementation plan that we're putting together with you, so that you are in a position in the decision making as part of the multi-stakeholder partnership modality that will be set up and beyond, that you can actually track that to then see that what was committed for adolescent girls is being implemented and what is the progress, and if there are gaps that A, are not being fulfilled, or B, that there are gaps, because the drive now is for more commitment makers to come on to plug the gaps where we see those gaps existing. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your response. Thank you all. I now have a quick question for all the panelists. Please share in 2 lines, what is your vision for girls' inclusion and accountability in generation equality process? And I also encourage all panelists to also type their responses in the chat. One last question to Ambassador Free. One last question to Ambassador Flynn. Ireland has made a specific generation equality commitment to funding adolescent girls by supporting the Girls Fund. How will Ireland continue to champion girl leadership in generation equality?
Thank you, Chelsea. The Girls Fund is something we're delighted to be involved in. It's an experimental fund set up by Purposeful and Plan International, and which we are very happy to support. And it's looking to build on the groundbreaking work that has been done for years by grant makers like Frida and Mama Cash, as well as the recent innovative efforts like the Global Resilience Fund, which is housed at Purposeful. And the aim is to move towards a more equitable and girl-led funding ecosystem. And we decided to test a collaborative grant cycle where it's part managed by Plan International and also part by Purposeful. And this has really been driven by and inspired by listening to adolescent girls directly. And that's why this new innovative way of doing it is so excited. And girl activists and the research we've seen shows where we need to target the funding. And I suppose that goes a bit to the question you asked there, Chelsea, to all the panelists on what's our vision looking ahead, but also what we've heard throughout the call this morning is the need to listen, the need to have girls and adolescents at the center of what we're doing in leadership roles, and fully involved, but also a strong focus, I think, today on accountability, and seeing that we're all following up on the commitments we make and that we're seeing real change. And that's really important. And a lot of what that comes back to is making sure we have the information, that we have the data, so that we can know if gaps are rising or if we're not meeting commitments we've made, so that we can try and address them. And that's something that's really important as well. It's too easy at the UN and in these type of formats to make commitments and to say the right things. And what's really important is that we make sure, particularly, for governments and for UN bodies, that we're held to account, that we actually follow through and deliver on the things we say we'll do. So that's what I'd hope we see in the period ahead, that we know we're making progress, that we know we're delivering on our commitments, and we're making a real change together. So I'll leave it at that, Chelsea. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Brian. And now I would like to have the last question to all the panelists. The last question is, what is your vision for girls, inclusion and accountability in generation equality process? I would like to call on to Ishanvi.
Thank you. I think what is the most important and our top shelf necessity, and that goes into my vision for including girls in generational equality processes forward, is once again having at least 1/3 of spaces available and given to adolescent girls. In the future generational equality forums and future CSWs that are being held, I hope to see girls of all ages within the adolescent demographic, all ages between 14 to 19, of any demographic that is possibly available, to be highlighted and broadcast in CSW events and GEF events. My vision includes ensuring that these voices are holding at least 1/3 of the decision-making space, as our voice is so absolutely necessary as 1/4 of the global population to be included on a global scale, and to have our voices and have our issues be heard as top shelf. Thank you.
Thank you for your response, Ishanbi. Could you pass the same question to another participant so that you can have a different response?
Sure. Yeah, Sabah from CREA, would you like to add your own thoughts too?
Sure, thank you, Ishanvi. Our vision is that we want girls and young people to be included as rights bearers, as agents of change, as decision makers and leaders, for them to be included in a way which supports and acknowledges their evolving capacity to take responsibility for their lives and their futures. Thank you. And I will pass it to Lopa.
Thank you so much, Subha. Thank you, Ishanvi, and thank you, Chelsea. Ishanvi, well heard on the 1/3 inclusion. And that actually links to what I want to say. Our vision for adolescent girls in generation equality going forward is co-leadership. That they are co-leaders, not simply participants, but they are co-leaders together with other stakeholders. And that means for us to be able to share with transparency the information, to be able to create the safe spaces, the sustainable ways in which they can participate, so as to be able to be co-leaders of generation equality going forward, whether that is through 1/3 participation or more. And beyond generation equality in other spaces, we know that generation equality is modeling the way to work in a multi-stakeholder way. And so we hope that the success of generation equality in demonstrating achievement will inspire and will be a good practice to take into other UN spaces, other policy-making spaces with the same co-leadership model in mind. Thank you. Sorry, I pass it. I'm sorry. It was for me to pass it on. I pass it on to you, Brian.
Thank you. Thank you. I mean, I covered a bit of this in my last segment, but I just agree with what absolutely the other panelists have just said right now. We really need to focus on making sure that girls and adolescent girls are not just involved, but are leaders in what we're doing and have fully a place at the table in everything we do in the period ahead. This isn't just about having them in the room or hearing from them. It's having them sitting at the table with us as equal partners in leading this forward. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Brian, and all the other ambassadors and participants who have given their response on the question. It was very energizing for me, and I hope it was the same for you. Next, I would like to hear from another adolescent girl here.
Chelsea, I am so sorry. Lakshmi, do you also want to go for the question?
Okay, yeah. I envision the world like where girls and young women are not limited only in the youth clubs, but rather they are involved in the overall mainstream development process. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your response. I would like to pass it so that we can hear to another adolescent girl who has been supporting a very interesting campaign that aims to bring empowerment to girls. Over to you, Aileen. The space is all yours.
Hello, everyone. As we discuss and demand the meaningful inclusion of adolescent girls in one of the most progressive gender equality commitments made during generation equality process, I would like to bring your attention towards an issue that is putting the lives of millions of girls at stake each year. Every year, millions of girls around the world are married before the age of 18. We want to see a world where girls live free from child, early, and forced marriages and unions, and have the opportunity and the agency to achieve their dreams. Would you also like to see a world like this? My name is Aileen, and I'm a social activist and young leader from Quetzaltenango, Guatemala. Today, I'm joining this dialogue to share about a campaign that has been mobilizing people to end forced, early, and child marriages. In response to the global issue that is affecting many girls, the Power to Girls campaign was created to call for immediate and urgent action to end child marriage. Girls Not Brides member organizations from around the world have joined together to call on decision makers to act now. The girls are the ones deciding if, when, and who to marry. As a result, for the last 6 months, the campaign has collected hundreds of commitments from activists, civil society, and decision makers to show the case, different steps being taken to address child marriages. The more of us that join together to raise our voices and demand change, the harder it will be for governments to ignore us. As a young leader and social activist, I have been working the past 7 years with the departmental network Let Girls Lead, La Niñas Lideran in Quetzaltenango, Guatemala, to advocate in favor of the girls of adolescents of my country and of the region. Together with my colleagues from the network, we get involved in the processes of creation and action of projects with a focus on education, psychoeducation, prevention of violence, and prevention of child and forced marriages and unions. We advocate at local, national, and global level, raising our voices to tell about the needs of girls and also to propose solutions in which we always emphasize the importance of including girls in the processes of creating and carry out projects. Last year, as a network, Let Girls Lead, we participated in a consultation carried out by Girls Not Brides, in which we were able to share stories, ideas, perspectives, experiences as girls leaders, and the reality of our country, Guatemala. These types of actions that include girls ensure that we are being heard and our realities is also being taken into account. I invite you to include in your projects, listen, and invest in education in the girls that are around you. The whole experience has been empowering and goes to show the power of campaigns that are rooted in the realities of people. I have joined the Power to Girls campaign because I firmly believe that it is necessary to have these strong alliances so that we can accelerate the progress towards a world that is safe and enabling for each and every girl. I'm inviting to all the girls and girl allies to join us in this campaign by making your Power to Girls commitment. This campaign is up until April 5th at global levels, and the national level campaign will continue until August this year. We're sharing the link in the chat so you can make your commitment today. Thank you so much again for this space.
Thank you so much, Aileen. That was so, so powerful. We loved and resonate with each and every word that you said. And we just are feeling really grateful and very empowered by everything that you had to say. And with this, we have covered all the major chunk of the event today. And for us to finally wrap up this dialogue, which we are very thankful for, I would like to call on Karen to just do the final closure. Karen, are you here with us?
Hello, everyone. Dynamic young people from all over the world. I am so excited after listening to all our wonderful speakers and moderators. I feel so elated. I don't know how to express my feeling. So I want you all to join me. I want us to make use of the chat. Share an emoji that expresses how you feel at the moment. Do you feel joyful? Do you feel happy? Are you satisfied with the presentations from our speakers? Are you satisfied with the content of the meeting of today? Just share an emoji to express how you feel. I'm gonna share an emoji to express how I feel. Woo, I see people sending emojis how they are dancing. Wow, wow, excellent, excellent. Ooh, wow. You see, this is the exceptional characteristics when young people come together, when young people take power in their hands, they make things change. They bring in a lot of energy, they bring a lot of dedication. And you can see from the chat box, everybody is, most people are excited, some are dancing. I don't think we want this meeting to end. But every good thing has an end. Thank you so much for your active participation. You're all amazing. I want to talk about the survey, which the girls who engage with AGIP have come up with. Please, you just need to take upon yourself, make a commitment to share, to post it, tell your friends, tell your colleagues, tell your neighbors, tell your partners to share, to commit, and please fill the survey. I really want to send special thanks to our panelists, Ambassador Brian, Lopa, you all were so amazing. I mean, thank you so much for staying with us right till the end. Thank you so much for coming. Laxmi, Suba, Ishavi, Milagos, all of you were so amazing. Our amazing moderators, Chelsea, Gulmina, Ellen, and to our formidable Pooja, who has been working tirelessly for us to record the success we are recording today. Thank you, our special guest, all of you who made it, the 100 and something young people from all over the world. I know you all had very tight schedule, but you left everything just to be part of this meeting. Thank you so much. You're all wonderful. You're all wonderful. Thank you so much, so very much for attending and for being part of this discussion. The chat box, the question and answer sessions were amazing. You asked so many questions. To Lopa, to Ambassador Brian, you needed clarity on certain things, and I'm certain that you all had it. Thank you so much for your questions. Thank you so much for engaging with us till this time. Thank you to the girls leaders who made this event possible. You're all amazing. I really want to say special thanks to you. And not forgetting our wonderful interpreters. Thank you for being there with us, because without you, some of the message and information wouldn't have reached us. Thank you so much to our interpreters. And thank you so much for being there, for participating. You all are wonderful. Thank you. I would like to end. We have all said so many things. Ambassador Brian, Lopa, all the panelists were exceptional. I want to end with one quote from these young people. I'm sure these words, it kept coming in. When girls have power, things change. And I can see and I can feel that change in the room after this meeting. I know the dynamic young girls and women and young people will go back after this meeting, and we're going to change the directives as far as human rights and accountability is concerned. Thank you so much, and send us chat, send us an emoji, how you feel. Thank you so much. Would have loved to stay back with you so much, but we have to go. Thank you so much. Thank you. We are grateful. Thank you, Ambassador Brian. Thank you for staying up to now. Thank you. Thank you, Robina. Thank you, Rose. Thank you, Hannah. Thank you, Flora. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, thank you. Thank you so much.